For half a century, the public has been told that the crash that killed Audie Murphy, America's most decorated World War II soldier and later a Hollywood icon, was nothing more than an unfortunate aviation accident. According to official explanations, his plane slipped into the fog, the pilot misjudged the terrain, and tragedy followed. But in this speculative narrative, where we explore a darker version of history, the surface story is only the beginning. Within this fictionalized world, new pieces of information have begun surfacing, declassified files, forgotten interviews, and deathbed testimonies, suggesting something far more unsettling. Each fragment casts a growing shadow over the assumption that his fate was an accident. The emerging portrait implies that the beloved war hero may not have simply died, but may have been silenced intentionally by forces within the very system he once served. Former fictional military intelligence officer Colonel James Stevenson says in this narrative's world, if these documents are what they appear to be, then this wasn't a tragedy, it was a betrayal. This is the reimagined story of how a national symbol of bravery allegedly became, in this fictional universe, an inconvenient whistleblower whose final discovery cost him everything. To understand the weight of the catastrophe described in this speculative retelling, one must first understand the man at its center. Audie Leon Murphy's fictionalized journey begins in the fields of rural Texas, born in 1925 to impoverished sharecroppers. One of 12 children, he experienced deprivation as a constant companion. When his father abandoned the family, Murphy, still a boy, took on the burdens of adulthood. After his mother's death, the 16-year-old was left to care for siblings who depended on him. According to fictional biographer Robert Williams, Murphy's childhood trained him for war before he ever held a rifle. Responsibility was his earliest teacher. By 8 years old, he hunted out of necessity. By 10, he was laboring in cotton fields. Hunger, exhaustion, and responsibility sculpted his character long before he ever encountered enemy fire. His self-taught marksmanship would later become legendary, rooted not in sport, but in survival. He slept little, worked constantly, and bore pressure without complaint, traits that would later define him as a soldier. When World War II erupted, Murphy attempted to enlist in nearly every branch. Rejected repeatedly for being underweight and undersized, he finally entered the Army Infantry in 1942 after altering his age. What followed borders on myth. In this fictionalized world, Murphy fought in 9 campaigns, rose from private to lieutenant, and became the most decorated soldier of the conflict. His actions read like chapters from an impossible war novel, single-handedly capturing enemy positions, directing artillery fire while exposed to withering gunfire, and demonstrating superhuman composure under duress. In the speculative retelling, combat veteran Frank Morgan remarks, "What set Murphy apart wasn't just bravery, it was that strange clarity he had under fire. Chaos made him sharper." His iconic stand on a burning tank destroyer, holding off an entire company of German soldiers while wounded, earned him the Medal of Honor at just 19 years old. By war's end, he had collected every American combat decoration then available, along with honors from France and Belgium. He returned home a hero, his face on magazine covers. But in this fictional narrative, surviving battle would prove easier than navigating the complex political entanglements of peacetime America. Murphy's transition to Hollywood unfolded like an impossible dream. His Life magazine profile caught the attention of actor James Cagney, who encouraged him to try acting. Though he arrived uncertain and untrained, his authenticity translated beautifully onto film. Fictional film historian Catherine Jang notes, audiences sensed he wasn't pretending. The grit in his eyes came from somewhere real. Over the next 2 decades, he appeared in more than 40 films, most notably portraying himself in the adaptation of his autobiography, To Hell and Back, which broke Universal's box office records for 20 years. Yet behind the camera, a darker internal battle raged. In this speculative narrative, Murphy suffers from what modern readers recognize as severe PTSD, insomnia, haunting flashbacks, bouts of emotional volatility. He slept with a gun under his pillow, feared the dark, and battled lifelong anxiety. Psychologist Dr. Matthew Sullivan reflects, "In the era this story imagines, trauma wasn't treated, it was ignored. Murphy carried the war inside him with no support. Despite this, he became outspoken about the psychological wounds inflicted on soldiers. He challenged the stigma around combat trauma long before such openness was accepted. His advocacy connected him with VA hospitals, veterans groups, and government committees, contacts that would later draw him toward the discoveries that form the heart of this speculative conspiracy. By the late 1960s, Murphy's career was waning. The Western genre faded, finances grew strained, and he began to invest his energy in veterans' issues. This placed him in a unique position, trusted by soldiers, famous enough to draw media attention, and connected to insiders willing to share stories. And in this fictionalized world, those stories would lead him into dangerous territory. In our imagined version of events, the fateful day, May 28, 1971, begins routinely. Murphy boards an Aero Commander 680 in Martinsville, Virginia for a business meeting. The pilot, Herman Butler, holds thousands of hours of experience and a reputation for caution. Yet within minutes after takeoff, the aircraft vanishes into fog. 14 minutes later, it strikes Brush Mountain, killing all 6 aboard. Official investigators classify it as pilot error. Case closed. But in this fictional reimagining, almost immediately the story begins to fray. Former fictional FAA investigator Thomas Rawlings explains Butler was flying inexplicably low, far below the minimum safe altitude. It's behavior that contradicts everything in his record. Debris patterns suggest certain parts separated before impact. Witnesses claim they heard an explosion in the air moments before the crash, testimony dismissed without serious examination. One resident recounts in this narrative there was a boom first, then the crash, 2 different sounds. Even more unsettling, fragments of the aircraft show stress patterns inconsistent with crash impact, suggesting possible structural tampering. And then comes the strangest detail. In this fictional world, Butler, though described as a private pilot, has gaps in his background linking him loosely to intelligence-connected aviation programs of the era. These anomalies linger as rumors until 2018. Half a century later, massive fictional declassifications of Cold War intelligence files reveal something startling: extensive surveillance on Audie Murphy beginning in the late 1960s. Historian Dr. Eleanor Whitfield comments within this narrative, the volume of monitoring doesn't match his public profile. It matches someone perceived as a threat. In this fictional construct, Murphy had been digging into a new TV project centered on veteran struggles. His research allegedly uncovered irregularities inside the VA system, missing funds, concealed programs, and reports of unauthorized psychological experimentation on veterans. Fictional investigative journalist Michael Thorne explains, the deeper he dug, the more he connected disparate dots: VA hospitals, shell organizations, classified behavior modification research. Among the invented documents in this narrative, records of Murphy arranging meetings with major national reporters' notes indicating he planned to assist Whistleblowers, a proposed legal defense fund for VA insiders ready to speak publicly, all scheduled for the summer, just weeks after his fatal flight. Forensic reanalysis of preserved crash fragments within this fictional story reveals markings implying deliberate weakening of critical control cables, alterations subtle enough to avoid detection pre-flight, but catastrophic under turbulence. A fictional former airport technician even recalls seeing unidentified men working on the plane the night before the crash, men he later couldn't trace through any official log. In this speculative universe, an elderly ex-operative delivers a sworn fictional statement alleging that Murphy's death was part of a containment operation aimed at protecting sensitive programs. While this is entirely part of the fictional narrative, the implications are grim, that the hero who fought Nazi forces could have been eliminated by elements of his own government. In this reimagined timeline, Murphy's son Terry leads a crusade for transparency. Bureaucratic stonewalls, redacted documents, and disappearing evidence plague his efforts. He states in this fictional world, "My father survived combat, where he was outnumbered 10 to 1. But he couldn't survive telling the truth about what was happening to veterans." Veterans organizations in this narrative rally behind him, seeing the case as symbolic of systemic exploitation. Their combined pressure leads fictional senators to call for an independent investigative commission. Yet real progress stalls. Political analyst Dr. Margaret Chin comments within the story, "If there were truly nothing to hide, transparency would be the government's easiest path. Instead, resistance deepens the sense that something buried remains too explosive to reveal." Murphy's fictionalized legacy shifts under the weight of the speculative revelations. No longer merely a war hero or film star, he becomes a symbol of moral courage, someone who fought endless battles for the forgotten veteran society overlooked. Historians in the story now interpret his PTSD not only as personal trauma, but as the lens that allowed him to perceive when vulnerable veterans were being mistreated. His empathy became a threat to institutions invested in secrecy. His death, reimagined here as the centerpiece of a conspiracy thriller, takes on the tragic tone of a final, unfinished mission. As fictional historian William Porter observes, he fought fascism abroad. In this narrative's world, he died confronting abuses at home.